So I'm often asked by my students, how do I come up with unique, interesting, and different ideas? And my answer to that is you have to really engage with a different kind of thinking in section 2. Now, what do I mean by this? What I mean is that it's very important in section 2 for you to engage with critical thinking. And so today we'll be focusing a little bit about what exactly is critical thinking? How can it help us, and why we should engage with critical thinking as a process? So, critical thinking is an activity or a process whereby you're systematically questioning, analyzing, interpreting, evaluating, and judging the piece of information or the prompt stimuli in front of you. So that means you're not taking the prompts as it is. You're trying to approach it from multiple angles, interrogating it, thinking about, what are some aspects that you can sort of dissect from the prompt. Question the prompt. Don't take it as something that's necessarily true. And so this process really relies on pre-existing knowledge and experience. It relies on your attitudes, your worldviews, what you know of the topic, and um, what you consider to be important, your values as well. And importantly, it's supported or it's motivated by your curiosity and inquiry. So if you're not being inquisitive, if you're not being curious about the topic, you're going to have a lot of trouble with critical thinking. And this is such an important thing for Section 2 because it is, I guess, one of the best ways to provide you with enough working space and provide you with enough uh, starting materials to start springboarding, generating your ideas. And so therefore, it's really something that you have to do or you should do to have enough engagement with the prompt. And something that I also consider to be very important is that this is a skill that is transferable across any topic, any theme. And so like in some of my other videos, where the most efficient and effective way to study for Section 2 is to identify consistent requirements of you across all Section 2 tasks. This is one of them, or this can be one of them, whereby you're going to use critical thinking, or you can use it across all topics, any themes. And so therefore, it'll be incredibly valuable for you and provide good value for time and effort spent to be good at critical thinking. And not only that, it's going to help you produce unique and interesting ideas. So, as an example, I'm going to sort of demonstrate how to uh, critically engage with these prompts. And if we have a task B here. Revenge, the sweetest morsel to the mouth that ever was cooked in hell. And so when you're trying to engage critically, the thing that you have to do is to ask questions. Why do we ask questions? Well, firstly, when we ask questions, we have answers. And our search, our pursuit for the answers is basically what's going to launch us into particular directions or lines of thought that will therefore provide the basis for our contention and provide the foundations for our idea generation. And I'll sort of illustrate what I mean by that. Well, revenge. Well, what is revenge is something that we can always start with. Defining key terms is a good place to start. What do we mean by revenge? It might be rectifying a particular wrong that we have incurred by the actions of another person. It doesn't have to be correct because uh, for all intents and purposes, you are writing the essay. So your definitions is probably as correct as any others, as long as it's not egregiously, perhaps as long as it's not like egregiously, or shockingly bad. Revenge, the sweetest morsel to the mouth that ever was cooked in hell. So this is like this is one of those prompts where you have to really read beyond what the message is saying. We're not literally talking about hell. We're not literally talking about something that is sweet uh, as a food, but we're really considering things like, why do we consider revenge the sweetest morsel to the mouth? Why was revenge something that was ever cooked in hell? And so if we answer such questions, why it was the sweetest morsel to the mouth, we might answer it as, well, it's the sweetest, aka it's the most satisfying or rewarding because, right, because we are um, rectifying wrongdoings. We're achieving justice, perhaps. We're um, inflicting the same harms that we were wrongfully uh, endured by and to another person, perhaps. And so even just answering a question like that launches you down possible lines of thought. And as you continue and build upon those ideas that you produce, when you answer the questions, you start to formulate things like your contention, your ideas. And so to answer, why was revenge the something that was ever cooked in hell? Well, it might be that there is a moral or ethical dimension. And so when I answer such a question from that perspective, I would then have ideas coming from answering such a question. And so I hope you can sort of understand that when we ask questions, those questions come from this concept of not accepting the prompt as it is. Question the prompt as to why it is the way that it is. And so for prompt 2, beware the fury of a patient man. We apply the same principles. We can always think about, firstly, what do we define as fury? Fury in what way, right? What is fury? And a patient man. So we know what patient means, but patient in what way, what particular manner? Patient in their actions, patience as a value of that person, or a patience in the way that they maybe analyze a situation, or patient in the way that they consider everything before they act. So there's a lot to break down here. And we can also come up with questions like, why should I be aware or be cautious of a fury of a patient man? And something that you can also do is to think about the antithetical or oppositional or contrary point, which is, in this case, well, why should I be aware of the fury of a patient man versus why should I be aware the fury of an angry man or impatient man, right? So think about the differences. Is there any difference between the two, the fury of a patient man versus the fury of an impatient man? Why would there be a difference? And then, for example, if I were to answer that, I might think about, well, it might be that the fury of a patient man is more potent. Why? Well, it might be because a patient man demonstrates significant restraint, demonstrates significant inhibition and control of themselves. Therefore, their fury is more likely to be dispensed and discharged in a more potent, focused, directed manner. Therefore, most likely going to, I guess, impact me or another person significantly. Compare that to the fury of an impatient man. We can consider things like, well, why is the fury, what is the nature of that impatient man's fury? Well, it might be that an impatient man doesn't demonstrate a lot of restraint, doesn't have a lot of inhibition or control over their emotions and their actions. Therefore, their fury is perhaps of a inconsequential, impotent nature, being the kind that might not affect us so readily. And in fact, it might even affect themselves adversely, causing self-harm, self-damage. And so that's why we might not have to be so afraid of the fury of an impatient man. So I hope you can already see that, when we think like that, we are engaging with the prompt. We're thinking about possibilities. We're not just accepting that, okay, sure, we have to be afraid. But the critical thinking part will prompt you to answer, to prompt you to question, why should we be aware of that? And then when you have a question, try and answer it. And that process of answering will provide you with the springboard for ideas. For prompt number 3, an eye for an eye will only make the world blind. This is another one where we have to see beyond the surface or the superficial or the literal meaning. We're not literally talking about eyeballs here. We're not really talking about blindness in the literal sense. But an eye for an eye, what does that actually mean? It's talking about revenge, is the simplest way. An eye for an eye or revenge will only make the whole world blind. And so what questions do you think you come up with? You can pause the video and think about it for a couple of seconds before continuing. Welcome back. And some questions that you might have come up with, or questions that I do think are important to consider, include, well, why does an eye for an eye make the whole world blind? And blind in what way exactly? Blind with rage, blind with fury, blind because they have suffered the consequences of a particular kind. And why, and answering why does revenge cause or produce a world that's blind, we might think about things like, well, it might be that revenge, the act of committing or pursuing revenge, is a particular, I guess, a particular pursuit which produces harm, produces um, consequences that affect not only a person and the, I suppose, victim, but also other people. So it spreads. It's revenge is propagated. It's something that propagates a cycle of revenge. I mean, and then it might be that as an individual pursues revenge, they affect other individuals, and so it spreads from the individual to the community, to society, to culture. And as it spreads, you will eventually end up with perhaps an entire nation obsessed with, rectifying any wrongdoings that it perceived to be have it perceives to have endured. And that is probably why, or a potential mechanism as to why revenge will make the whole world blind. And so, in coming up with such a potential mechanism or an answer to the question, that idea is something that an individual or a person might continue on as their contention, and then thus springboarding their ideas. Now, for prompt number 4, uh, I'm going to leave that to you as the viewer for your own exercise. Comment below what are some questions that you want to ask yourself, and therefore, and answer it if you can, to sort of demonstrate this idea of critical thinking. So, to sort of summarize what I did in the previous page, how do we actually become, how do we be critical in section 2? Well, there's no specific way, there's no prescribed criteria or step by step, but some things that you can do is, well, firstly, identify the conventional view to a prompt. And this is important because as uh, individuals, as humans, we're all subjective, we've all got biases. And so it's important to consider what is the gut reaction, okay? And then when you have the gut reaction, what are some other interpretations of a prompt could there be? So put aside, acknowledge, but then dismiss the instinctual or the gut response or view to the topic and try and explore it from a different way, right? And like I've said, and like I've, and like I did before, it's important to always redefine keywords because that's the first step that you need to sort of do before you can critically engage with the prompt. Because if you don't really put a concrete definition of what revenge is, how are you going to ask questions like, why is revenge so bad, for example? And like I've said, do not accept the prompt as it is, always question its validity. And so these are some principles that you can sort of think about when you're trying to be critical with a particular prompt. So then how do we actually practice critical thinking? We know the how, what can we do? And so this is something that you can do, not just in front of a piece of paper or in front of your laptop. And what I would encourage you do, and for all my students, I encourage them, is to be naturally curious about the world. Ask ourselves and think about why are certain things the way that they are? You know, what's caused such outcomes, right? And we can think about things like, well, why do we have democracy? How come my government is the way that it is, right? Why do we do these things, right? Why do I have to wheel out the bin on Monday evenings to collect garbage, right? Why Monday? Just thinking about those things, answering them. And if you can't answer them, do some research, right? And what else we can also do? Well, we could ponder on any subject matter without the constraints of section 2 essay writing. And I emphasize ponder because it's such a rare thing that we as busy individuals do, where we just, sitting down while we're eating, while we're enjoying some food, think about things, right? Think about technology. You know, what's going on with technology? What's going on with social media? You know, why are those things going on? Ponder on anything, because it is really, section 2 is really a creative thing in disguise. If we have such creative faculties and if we're really good at being creative, we can come up with so many different questions to answer and so many questions to pose to ourselves in section two, thereby producing a lot of unique ideas to work with. So the point of the fact that I want to make is really take the time to sit down, think about the world, ponder, consider why things are the way that they are. And read your own essays and be as harshly critical as possible as well. Pretend you're the assessor. Pick apart your ideas. What are some logical weaknesses present in your writing? And lastly, experiment with being purposefully contrarian, arguing as the devil's advocate. So on any particular subject matter, you know what kind of side or which side you're going to take. Why don't you try and entertain what the opposite side would be? Practice your critical thinking by engaging with that contrarian viewpoint and trying to argue for it. And that will provide you with the flexibility to be able to think outside the box and to uh, identify the stereotypical view and then argue against it. And so some questions to ponder, and I'd like you to consider. Well, firstly, why are social media platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, Facebook so popular? What are some adverse consequences of education? We all know education is good, but we never think about what are the negatives of it. Can there be negatives of education? If so, in what contexts in what particular circumstances can the negative effects of education arise? Why do we hear more about bad news than good news? What are the theoretical benefits of dictatorship? And what are the theoretical benefits of state-controlled media? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Comment in the video below, and I'd be happy to respond and sort of discuss your thoughts. So that's all I've had today. A bit shorter in terms of content, but I hope that was helpful in terms of getting you to think about how to actually engage with Section 2 prompts in a critical manner. And and to summarize, the way that we do that is to, well, as a principle, never accept the prompt as it is, always question its validity. And as we question the validity, we come up with certain things that we need answered. And our act of answering such questions is basically the material, the basis of what we can springboard our thinking and springboard our idea generation, thereby providing us with novel lines of thought when it comes to coming up with ideas, when it comes with generating a overall response. So I hope that's been helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know.